Hey folks, this is Alan Jones with HiFi Buys, doing HiFi Chats number 21, I believe it is. And I wanted to welcome our guest today, Anders Ertzeid, with he's VP of Sales and Marketing at Hegel Music Systems. And he's actually in Oslo and kind enough to join us during his evening hours. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing absolutely fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, shoot, it's a blast. You know, Hegel is a new line for us. Our Hegel Music Systems is a new line for us. And I like the music systems being part of Hegel because, you know, we're very much music oriented and all of us watching are. And I appreciate all of you out there that are joining us today. This should be a very interesting conversation. I have never actually met Anders in person. I've heard an awful lot of good things about you and looking forward to learning about you as well as some of your music and what you got you into the business and those kinds of things, and then getting into some product discussion as well. So I'm looking forward to that. If I could ask everybody out there, if you will, to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, it'll kind of keep you informed of what's going on, as well as help us with our Google searches and things along that lines. So we appreciate that very much. As well, if you don't mind going to hifibuys.com and signing up for our newsletter. We put a newsletter out about once a week, sometimes twice. But they're informative newsletters, what's going on. I have some reviews, sometimes a special here or there and that kind of thing as well. And so we'd love you doing that. Last week we had Ryan with Meridian on, and that's actually on our YouTube channel. And so you can watch any of the previous HiFi chats and see what's been going on in them. There are actually some pretty interesting folks on it. As we all know, there are some really cool guys in our industry. And next week we'll have Odyssey headphones. And so we are very excited about doing that. We had Grado on as well, so we're very excited to be able to do that. Also, if you will, please, we have questions. There's a spot there on the screen where you can ask questions, and we would love you to be involved and interact as much as possible. And we will get those questions answered probably towards the end, but we may answer some of them on the way as well. And today, I want us to never forget, here in the US, we had an amazing event on 9/11. Such a sad time, and basically prayers for all the survivors. You know, it's amazing the people that went to work and the bravery of those folks and some of the great stories that have come from it, and also some of the sad stories that have come from it as well. But my prayers for all of you out there as survivors and any of us that feel the pain of that event, as I do. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. Anders, you ready?
I am.
Awesome. All right, so we want to get to know you. So how are things in Oslo? Everything good with the pandemic and all that?
Yeah, it's not so bad, to be honest. I think we're quite lucky. We haven't been as hard affected as most of the United States. So I mean, we're just 5 million people in our whole country.
Right.
So I think we've been a bit spared a little bit because we're remote and we're small, and you know,
right.
one of the prime ministers in the Nordic countries said in the beginning of the pandemic that we're Scandinavians and we like to keep a distance. I mean, keeping a 6 feet distance, that is actually for us to move closer because we prefer 15.
so you're going against the grain. Well, I'm glad to hear that things are well there. Here in Atlanta, where you know our population for the kind of the whole area is larger than Norway. So, anyway, I'm happy to hear that things are well there, and I know we've had no problem getting product from you guys. I know your business is doing very, very well. And what I'd like to know a little bit about is family, where you grew up.
Well, yeah, I grew up in a small suburb just north of Oslo, our capital. So 2 sisters, 2 brothers, mom, dad, and a little dog.
Awesome.
I tried to Google the name of the dog in English, but it was impossible because it was a Norwegian hunting dog. They didn't have it outside of Norway.
Really?
Yeah, so it would be moose dog. That's a
moose dog.
Moose dogs, big and gray and fluffy.
I'm going to have to look that up. And Chris, if you can find something out there to put a little picture up and something, that'd be awesome. I don't know if you have that ability, but that'd be really awesome. I'd like to see that. I have a little dog and his name is HiFi.
HiFi.
And his little profile is on our website as well. So he's back in the crate behind me. So hopefully he'll keep his manners up.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yes, yes. Well, that's awesome. You know, two brothers, two sisters. I grew up with one brother and one sister, and I was the baby of the family. Will always be my mama's baby, I guess. So, you know,
Same here. I don't think I was planned. I'm 8 years younger than my youngest sister. So it's a big family now with my mother has 12 grandchildren and 8 great grandchildren. So I've always had lots of people around.
Holy smokes. Very good. Tell us a little bit about hobbies.
Well, my hobby basically now is it's traveling in HiFi. That's what it's been for a very long time. Hey, dog.
Say, hey, it's somebody.
They muted you, I think. They muted you.
Yep. Chris, if you could get somebody in here to help get HiFi out of here, that'd be great. Thanks. Sorry about that. That didn't last very long. Normally he gets all the way through just fine. He might settle down here in just a second. So we'll see.
Norwegians.
Yeah. He normally doesn't bark much. He didn't talk that much. So life experiences, things that have had an impact on who you are, Anders.
Yeah, I've always been thinking that, you know, I wish I could have said something profound. I mean, this is a special day, and I think even if this day shaped America a lot, it also shaped us a lot. I remember exactly where I stood. I get goosebumps when I talk about it, what happened, and I knew what I did. But essentially, I think we're all constantly being molded. I mean, you and I are both grown-ups. We know that there might be special things that, you know, takes you over a hurdle, change. But I think it's just friends and family and the community I grew up in that has gradually shaped me and given, you know, luck and things has given me the opportunities. You're muted again, but.
Yeah, sorry. I appreciate the feelings for that. And, you know, there's no doubt that this day changed the world and showed, you know, basically how vivacious some folks can be. And, you know, we all are connected and we're learning that more and more as we go through this time. So anyway, I appreciate that very, very much. I know all of us do. So how did you get into this business?
Well, everything for me started with my bigger brothers starting to buy HiFi systems. There was a lot of techniques, and Luxman were the big things in Norway at the time. When I was a kid, 10 years old, and got to follow them to the HiFi stores we had here.
Awesome.
And yeah, I mean, when I was 8, 9 years old and all my friends were playing with Playmobil or Lego, I sat with Techniques catalogs and counted and dreamt about what kind of system I should have in the future. And then when I was 13 years old, my elder brother, he started a HiFi store, HiFi and CDs. And in 1987, the plan was to have all the CDs ever published. That was very easy in 1987.
Yeah, it was. When you first said it, I was like, oh my gosh, but
he had to give that up within a few years. But yeah, you know, I loved it. And the store was far away. So I took the train down to see him every Friday after school. Took 5 hours on the train, spent the night there, worked in the store on the Saturday, and took the train 5 hours back. And spent every single cent I earned buying more HiFi.
I've been in that same boat, and I remember just studying magazine after magazine, book after book, and so on and so forth. And just amazing how it's, you know, I think one of the things that taught me the most was I bought and sold used gear out of my house. And then when I opened my store at the beginning, it was purely used gear. And by owning all of that and being able to play with it all and so on, it just gave me such an education. And I've always been
the annoying kid in the HiFi stores in the area.
That?
Were you also the annoying kid going to the HiFi stores and bothering them?
Yes. And on about the 40th visit, you know, we finally connect and they realize, okay, he's starting to know something.
I always thought they didn't remember me from the last time.
Yeah, go in disguise. Well, that is awesome. So tell us about like your first time going, wow. most people that are in this industry had that kind of time where they just went, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this. I know it happened to me, and I can remember that moment, what I listened to, what the gear was, so on and so forth. So can you share that with us?
Absolutely. Because I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was 1995, and I had been selling hi-fi for some time. I'd started growing up, and we sold a lot of Infinity and Mark Levinson up here in Oslo. And because we sold so much, the distributor of Infinity and Mark Levinson invited us to go to Mark Levinson training in Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And the first really superb hi-fi experience I had was with the Wilson Grand Slams and Mark Levinson. I can't remember which Mark Levinson power amp it was. It was 31.5 and 30.5 CD drive and DAC, and I cannot remember the model names, but it was fantastic in their own listening room up there in Connecticut. After 2 days of training, they finally turned the system on and tried to show you some things and what to listen for. It was a fantastic experience.
And you just kind of go, wow, I had no idea music could be like this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they also played us movies, like they call it a movie called Wind, and I've Googled the movie numerous times, recently too. And it's not a very popular movie, but the experience of the movie on that 2-channel system was amazing.
I'll have to find that and see what that sounds like. Popular or not, sonically, if it's good, we're all about it.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So tell us about a particular piece of music that moves you and why, and how did you find it?
Well, this is even worse because I listen to a lot of music. I listen to all kinds of music. But my musical muse nowadays is really my girlfriend, which we got to know each other over Springsteen, and we started talking. Yeah, and it's a few years ago, but we're always revisiting. I hate to say it, but Kanye West. I wish I could say something, a fantastic classical piece.
Listen.
It's just great, old and new.
Yep. Well, listen, I always tell everybody, I don't care what music you listen to, if it moves you, that's what makes me happy. So I love that you have that. And you mentioned Bruce and my sister and brother-in-law. That's pretty much probably got them together as well. So and I hope they're listening.
Excellent. Me and a friend, we used to travel around Europe to try to see Bruce Springsteen live in a new city every time. And we tried to follow the price of beer, but Bruce Springsteen was a big thing, and seen him live many, many times.
He's really, really awesome. I've seen him live a couple of times. Even got to see him with my parents just a few years ago. So anyway, that was really fun. So tell us about mentors. Who is or are your mentors in business or life?
Well, I have to say my brother. But my brother got me into this business, and a lot of the opportunities, work-wise, has obviously come from them because you work with each other in one position or the other. But I've had great people around me for many years in several jobs in several places, and you meet people you learn from every single day. But I think my biggest mentor would be my brother, because that's the guy you always looked up to when you were 15, 20, 25 and starting the career. But there are so many great people that know so much more than me out there, and I keep meeting them in this business, which is fantastic.
Yeah, the thing that I learned, and I learned it earlier, and it just keeps being cemented every year of my life, every month, every day, is that when you have passion for this stuff, there is no end to the learning curve. And I've had we had a retailer here in town at one point that was a kind of a know-it-all, and it just kind of made me realize that somebody didn't know something, because it's there is no end to the learning curve. If you have passion for this stuff, there is just absolutely no end. It's not possible to learn all about it in life. It's
absolutely.
So that's been something that has always kept me. And you're right, there are a lot of bright people, and I learn from them. I think of the manufacturers that I have and the people I've been able to learn from, and I've been blessed by their kindness and also their ability to teach me things in the way that I need to understand. And so then I take that information and try to convey it to the customers in the way that they understand. And it's a different thought. So
one of the things that I appreciate, I'm 48 years old, so I'm not young anymore, but I'm still too old for some of the people who really started, the heydays of this industry. So I'm so happy and thankful that I started so early that I was invited, in my early 20s to meet Leon Cuby from Harman, to meet Sparky from Infinity Loudspeakers, and all of these people who really meant something and had experienced this business, before I really did.
It's amazing when Arnie was building back then.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it was pretty far ahead of some stuff.
It was.
and even today, some of those applications are out there. So it's awesome. I'm glad you had those experiences as well. I'm sure it's paid off well for you. And I don't mean monetarily. I mean, from, your experiences. So,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about your path to Hegel Music Systems.
Well, that was slightly more unusual. But before I started working for Hegel Music System, I did that actually 2 days before Lehman Brothers fell in 2008, which wasn't ideal. But before that, I'd been CEO of a HiFi store chain in Norway with 16 stores spread out. And I'd been in that job for 5-6 years. And towards the end of 2007, I was just completely worn out. I think you know exactly how that job is, and you probably know it better than most. You're one of a few, but I wanted to do something else, and I thought about just stopping the job and starting working in China because I wasn't aware of the financial crisis quite yet.
Right.
Well, I did that, and then financial crisis hit, and I just gave up the whole Chinese project. But I knew Bent, the founder and owner of Hegel, because we had been, our store chain was the biggest Hegel dealer in the world back then.
Wow.
And Hegel was about this big compared to what it is today. So we were basically it. So we got talking and we got talking and we got talking, and the financial crisis got worse and worse and worse. And then we found out that, we have something. Ben has a product that is really, really good. No one was ever doubting that. The Hegel product and the core IDs and the technical side of it was fantastic. Ben was also really good with money. So when the finance crisis hit, he had money in the bank, and he said, we can keep the doors open here for a year, even if nobody calls, not a problem. And I knew something about building businesses, and I had a deep passion for HiFi. So we found out that we have something together that we don't have separately, and we fill each other out quite well. And so we just started working with it together. Bent Halter is still the sole owner. I'm not an owner of Hegel, and I never want to be.
Okay.
But we started building this together, and it's been a fantastic ride.
Well, everything I've heard about it, the more and more as I spend time with it, the more recognition it seems to have. It's definitely a brand that's on the rise. And I will tell you, the design is very solid. And I like how you kind of keep the family together and the looks of it and that kind of thing. So, you actually have a plan, not just kind of building a product and then another one. And then, so I really do like that you have kind of a narrow-minded focus on what's kind of going on out there. So it's good. It's good. So awesome. That sounds fun. And so I want to take just a break for a moment. And if we will ask everybody out there to like and subscribe, it again helps us with our Google search engine and stuff. And if you will, go to hifibuys.com and actually sign up for our newsletter. Also, one of the things I wanted to mention is HiFi Chats has a playlist out there that Chris will put out there for you to be able to see and click on. and you end up finding all the music that's mentioned during this, including Kanye. You end up finding will be out there. And also we want to just, again, prayers for all the survivors of 9/11 today, and actually in every day. So if we will, so let's get on to a little bit of this. I want to find out, what are the main reasons that you feel like Hegel Music Systems is who they are, not what they are?
Well, I thought about that because I knew you were going to ask that.
Just so you guys know, I do send them the questions ahead of time. That's in all fairness. Okay.
I think one of the things that makes us who we are is that we're just simple, good, honest people. I think we do this for the business. We do this because we have a deep, deep passion for hi-fi music. I mean, our owner still plays in a Thin Lizzy cover song rock band, twice a year. But we're honest people. We never want to lie. I think that's something that is very deeply rooted in us. Even though it's bad news sometimes, we don't lie about it. We don't make phony things. I don't know if that sets us apart from other companies, but I think it's what makes us who we are, at least.
Well, I'm very much believer, and you kind of nailed it there for it in that sense. I've said this on the HiFi chats many times, that culture is what creates great products. And, it's, it through, what I call an open book or honesty, you actually, will build that kind of a product. And that's the kind of thing I really like about it. Again, I think it really does show your passion for it, and also your core beliefs. So it's very good.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I do not know, and I don't really care how other companies do it, but one of the things we've practiced since that beginning in 2008 is our roundtable product development beers, as we call them, where it's a round table. Everybody in the company, if you work at the warehouse, or if you're the owner, or you're the VP, or you're whatever you are, we get together 2-3 times a year and we just eat burgers, have a great time, and debate products. We don't really look. We never look at what Macintosh or Primaire or NAD or whatever they do. The
Right.
only thing we have really discussed, and we've been quite strict about this, is how do we think people really want to use their Hegel product? What would you want to have in this? How would you want to use it? Where do we think we could make something fantastic, even though it goes against all the odds? And sometimes we've come up with products that have been tremendous successes, and very often we've come up with solutions that are quite different. Like, we don't have an app. We launched a brand new CD player in 2017. It's crazy.
Yep. You kind of hit on something in my head that I've talked a bit about, but people always ask me, do you get out and see what others are doing? And I don't pay a lot of attention to it. I've always said, this is what I believe in, so let's move forward in the directions that I believe in. And I always get interaction from the folks here at the store to make sure that that I'm listening to everyone that I know is part of our culture, and it allows me to kind of make better decisions by having everyone's input. And, I don't mind saying that I've had guys here tell me to do things at times that I've said no to, that I'm now doing. And so it just takes sometimes for my stubborn brain to accept some of those ideas and that kind of thing as well. And so anyway, I'm happy that I can have an open enough mind, but also be stubborn enough to say no when I need to. So, but
quality, I think.
Yeah,
that's quality.
Well, I try. So tell us a little bit about the history of Hegel.
Well, yeah, the history of Hegel was not really about becoming an audio company at all.
Okay.
When our good owner Bent studied for a degree in microelectronics back in the late 80s.
Wow.
He stumbled onto something that was related to audio, because he was playing guitar in this Thin Lizzy cover band called Hegel Band.
Oh,
named after a German philosopher.
okay.
Then they were playing at the live stage of the what you call it, the student society at the technical university all
Okay.
the time, and had concerts. And then the amplifiers broke down, and the student, what you call it, fraternity or student organization didn't
Yes.
have enough money to buy new amplifiers. So Bent said, "Yeah, that doesn't matter. You know, I study electronics. I'll just buy some parts and build 5, 6 amplifiers." And so he did. And he made them, and 5 of them are actually still playing on that
Wow.
same stage 30 years later. And one is in our museum. But what inspired him to start what is now Hegel was that he stumbled onto the problem of distortion, and how these old white papers from Motorola and Toshiba on how to build a solid state amplifier was still being followed almost to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
People had done things in how they used the feedback and global feedback, how much they used and so on to reduce distortion as they started discovering it throughout the late 80s. But the amplifier's design was still the same. So he thought to make his master paper on testing with computers these original white papers on amplifier design, and see if he could come up with a completely different way of doing it. So he wrote the paper about that. And as far as we know, we're the first company in the world who used computers simulations to test the old Motorola and Toshiba white papers on solid state amplifier design.
I
That
had
was
no idea.
89. No, exactly. We don't talk so much about that. But, you know, school ended. He had his paper, he had his IDs. He wanted to develop it further, but he needed money. So for a few years, he worked as a transistor designer with Tonberg Audio in Norway
Yep.
and a few other places doing
Great
things.
brand.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the sad thing is that in 2010, we were offered to buy the Tandberg name for 10 cents. And we didn't, because we wanted to make our own history. That's a digression. But
Wow.
yeah, it's not. Then in the mid 90s, Bent got an investor who is now one of the 5, 6 biggest telecom companies in the world, because they thought this sounds great. We can make this design into an actual working amplifier, and then we could license these as modules to the likes of Harman, Sony, Monster Cable, whoever wanted to make amplifiers.
Mm-hmm.
And for 5 years, there were 7 engineers working full-time in Oslo. The telecom company wasted between $3 and $4 million on this, because when we had the patents finished and the amplifier system done, and we tried to start to license it, do you think Sidney Harman or Leon Kuby or anyone from Sony wanted to say, okay, so these Norwegian stupid guys can make better amplifiers than us, let's license that? It didn't work.
No, I wouldn't think it would.
No, it didn't.
I think everybody thinks their way is the best way.
Of course. That's
Otherwise, we wouldn't have all the brands. That's true in anything, cars, whatever.
of course. That's how it is. And we have all the answers. But no, in 2000, when the dot-com bubble burst, everyone wanted to pull out of technology companies, and our owner got to buy the company back, and the patents with it for next to nothing, because it wasn't really worth anything. And then he started building only our own amplifiers and DA converters and CD players using this technology, and building the company as it is today. Some amplifiers have been made in the 90s too, but that was just sample amplifiers, family and friend sales. We exported some to Japan in 1998, but really it was 2000 onwards. You know,
Wow.
just building stone upon stone.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
In 2008, when everything hit, it went boom up.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a tough year.
Yeah.
I remember it well. I opened in 95. 2000, 9/11 was a very tough time when that happened. 2001, I believe. And then the 2007, 8, 9, we were finally starting to climb out just a little bit. And, it was, that was some tough times. I don't mind saying I was low on cash, but at the same time buying lines because there were other stores going out of town here in the city. And so I was trying to arrange what I kind of wanted. So I actually picked up Vandersteen and Audio Research and Magnapan at that time. And actually, one of the gentlemen that actually owned the store were two of those brands were at actually works for me today. So yes, I know. His name is Ed Scruggs, really great guy, and we're really happy to have his experience and that kind of thing here. So anyway, a lot of fun. So how do you think the products have evolved as the world has evolved?
Well, we use them completely differently. I mean, it's nothing in our community and the people who's going to ever see this video. If I say who's spinning a disc in 2020, they'd be, and I would too, to a certain degree. But really, who spins a disc in 2020? Not that really.
Not many, but I do find that people like having a CD drawer. So we're actually I find that the CD players that have the DACs built in, so people can stream to them and kind of allows one box to kind of do it. I find that to be a pretty popular product. So
absolutely true, and we sell a lot of CD players.
Yep.
But what has technically how you use the products has evolved and changed a lot. With streaming, you're able to store and distribute your own high definition media. You have high definition streaming engines and so forth, and adapting the products to make the most out of that has been a huge task. And it's also I personally think, one of the big saviors of the HiFi business, but also the biggest thing that distinguish the brands that it should be like this, that some decline and others have a sharp rise. Because if you manage to stay on top of the development curve, you have happy times, and if you don't, you struggle. So it's a lot has changed because of what has happened in the world.
It has amazed me to watch some companies improve their sound so much over time, and other companies kind of keep the same look and yet not change their sound over time, and yet the prices continue to go up, and so the value quotients are changing and adjusting. And I that's actually a very good example that you show there. So I would agree with that.
I think you see even more in speakers.
Yes.
I've been talking a lot to my friends about this, because you see that 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, you could take this small speaker brand and this huge speaker brand, and they could compete head to head.
Yep.
That very rarely happens now, unless some with a small speaker brand has a very good idea.
Yep, absolutely. It's hard to get noticed. Yes. And because there is a sea of product out there. And I would think and one of the biggest problems is actually having retail distribution.
Yep.
So it's one of the biggest problems that all manufacturers face today, is being able to find enough quality places to put your product. Mm-hmm. And we find that the shows actually seem to have a lot of the products that didn't have good distribution would end up winding up at the shows and kind of being their own retail floor to that point. And so it's definitely changed a little bit to that degree. It's one of the reasons why I'm extraordinarily careful about who I carry, because I want to make sure that they have quality distribution, because if they don't, then basically I'm in short term with that brand, and that's not what I'm interested in. So
it's funny, because there's become so big differences around the world. Going from America to Europe, we have to, as a small manufacturer, it can be challenging for us to make products that both fit America or the American market, and products that fit the European market. Mm-hmm. And we tried to do both. So it took us quite a few years since our humble beginning in the US in 2009 until we really got to understand the HiFi market and the differences. And I'll tell you one thing. I'll actually almost show you. yesterday, or actually today, I was traveling and flying to another country, which seems very exotic nowadays. But I came home from Denmark, and we have these
Okay.
three small countries: Norway, Sweden, Denmark. We lie together. We're about 18 million people altogether.
Beautiful area.
We sell to one HiFi store that are the sole retailer for Hegel products in these three countries. Do you know how many stores they have for 18 million people?
No.
82. 82
Wow.
stores. This is their paper that they just, audio paper.
That's amazing.
Their name is HiFi Clubben. But when you think about that, you have a HiFi Clubben store in the high street, and you have a HiFi Clubben store here and there. It's different. It's completely different. So there's different demands from different countries.
That's amazing when you look at that. I'm just absolutely blown away by that. Just, I don't know, just that is a ton of stores. So does everybody have a hi-fi system over there? I mean, is it a big thing? Because, you know, here it's like surround sound and theater and that kind of thing. And yet we also have a very large hi-fi community, but the major push is towards automation and kind of whole house sound and that kind of thing.
A lot of the hi-fi stores in the US moved into automation.
Yes.
But here it's different. It's very different. I think that people spend a lot of time indoors in Scandinavia. It's our culture, and it's also the weather.
Yes.
So there is a bigger culture for buying, you know, home entertainment systems, and we have a much smaller. It's much less normal to hire a guy to come and set up your TV in Norway than it is in the US.
Really?
Yeah.
So y'all install your own TVs, but hire somebody to install your stereo.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. But we'll tell you that we love installing stereos. It's one of the things that we actually pride ourselves in, because we know that if they use us to install it, they'll actually get a better sound out of it. So we actually prefer doing that because we want our customers happy, and we want when their friends come over to say, hey, where did you get that? And have the customer, oh, they brought it, I bought it, and they came out and set it up for me. So you know, that's really interesting. I like that. You know, I will tell you that, you know, I remember when the iPod came out and everybody was like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do, Alan? I said, well, you know, the same thing I've been doing. And the nice thing about it is the iPod actually brought an awful lot of recognition to music back again. And then after people got interested in the music, then they started going, well, maybe it can sound better. And so they're finding those ways for it to sound better. I know we're many years from that as we speak, but I think that's one of the big things that's been happening. And so now we're starting to see definitely a resurgence in, shall we say, the home audio component without a TV, and some of them with a TV, but still listening to 2-channel audio. And so anyway, that's kind of what I do at home. Is I have 2 speakers and TV sitting in the middle, because I live in a 1-bedroom condo, but you end up finding that that way I'll have the TV on, but you know, I'm listening to music, and it's actually pretty awesome. So I'll always tell everybody, fidelity, you know, is not about the amount of speakers you have, but the quality of the speakers and the amplifiers that produce it. So
absolutely.
Yep.
But the iPod was one of the things that helped bring 2-channel hi-fi systems back, because we were sailing into the abyss, I think you could say, for years in the 90s. And then, you know, in the mid 2000, the iPod came, and people started using that. And after the iPod, which, you know, also is a really good audio player, but that said, after the iPod came people who made this into bling. Then you had the Dr. Beats headphones by Dr. Dre, and normal people. We're normal too, but in our own special way.
normally abnormal.
Yeah. Then you know, average people who hadn't been introduced to high performance audio because they've never had, they never were alive at that time. Yep. They started paying more for better headphones, right? Yes. And then they got accustomed to paying more for better sound, also for the looks, of course, but for better sound that came with it. And then came Spotify, and you already had Rhapsody in the US
Yep.
for many years, but it never really caught on. But Spotify, whoa.
Yep.
So then people started listening to more and more and more music, and they started paying more for these fancier and fancier headphones. You'll hear much more about that next week when Odyssey comes.
Yep.
But it changed it. It changed it from being just us old farts like me who grew up dreaming of techniques, turntables, to having people come up from below and start investing in good sound. And that's fantastic. And there's nothing I'm more enthusiastic about than that now we're a range of people and we're playing hi-fi, and it's great.
Yeah, but actually open up a much larger market. I agree with that. And it, you know, the one thing I will say is, you know, we got a headphone bar down here where we have about 16 stations, and they each have their kind of their own jack and their own headphone amp and that kind of thing, sometimes combined in the same area. But, you know, we're doing headphones from, you know, $99 up to about $3,000 or $4,000. And so we cover a pretty good range of product in that regard. And I've you know, I always tell everybody it's kind of like the entry level drug to our business. And, you know, it's where you kind of, wow, I can't believe that there's something like that out here. And it's nice that they can do it portably without bothering anybody. And, you know, a lot of these folks that work in cubicles and things along that lines, they get an opportunity to have some music and have some good stuff pumped into their head instead of just sitting around listening to noise while they're working. So pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Great discussion. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I had another question for you, but we kind of already answered it. So I'm going to move on and kind of get into some product here. But I'd like to ask y'all, if you will, to like and subscribe to our channel out there. You'll see where to do it. I do ask you, if you will, please, if you have questions, Anders would love to answer them. So, and I have one or two, I think, that are already here for us. And so I'll try and get into those kind of as we get into the discussion of the products. Also, last week we had Ryan with Meridian here. Actually, I saw him today and did a great theater demo at a showroom here in Atlanta. And next week we'll have Odyssey headphones, which you mentioned as well. Also, if you will, go to hifibuys.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'd love that. That way we can keep you informed of what we're doing. I promise not to hammer you with a newsletter every day, and we won't be invasive, okay? So let's get into a little bit of product line. Again, I have Anders Ertzeid with Hegel Music Systems, VP of Sales and Marketing for them. Really interesting guy. I've really enjoyed this chat so far. This is really, really great. So you'll have kind of an entry level. Most of what you do is integrated, and we're going to talk about why that is here in just a minute. But you start off with kind of like the H90 and the H120, starting off at about $2,000, and I believe, let's see, right at $2,000 and $3,000. I believe those products are here in the U.S. Yeah. And tell us about those.
Well, the H90, which is now actually just being replaced by the H95. Right. Is our entry level, and it's still being $2,000. Our entry level is something that we were fighting the hardest about internally, because I think it's probably the most important product we have, because that is, for many people, you know, $2,000 is not pocket money for the most of
it is not.
It just isn't. And if it is, that's absolutely fine. But that may be people's first experience of a Hegel product. And they may have had an NAD, or they may have had, you know, whatever, that they want to, you know, take it one step further. And then they step into the Hegel realm. And that should be something completely different right there at the beginning. So the H90 are now 95.
Right.
They are, I almost said in my humble opinion, but it's not that humble when I think about it. They are fantastic amplifiers for the money. We're very, very proud of them. They have so much of the DNA from the biggest ones, and they are definitively some of the hardest things to do, because you have to weigh everything to get it down to that price range. Mm-hmm. So the H90 and 95 are really, really strong. The 95 replaced the H90 just now because we wanted to further improve the streaming and digital side of it.
So what did you do to it? What did you do to improve it from the 90 to the 95?
Well, honestly, we improved the DA converter, the quality of both the analog stage or analog part of the DA converter, as well as the DA converter chip, and the streaming engine is more powerful, so it can have more functionality. But we made it for the H190 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This DAC, and even then we had taken it from a higher model. But we realized when we put it in our H120 last year, we started to make so many of these complete DACs if they were the same, so it started to cost us a lot less.
Right.
And then when we put that in the H95 now too, we were making thousands of these DACs at this, any given time. So we could push the price even further.
Economies of scale are a big deal, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So then
Yes.
we can suddenly put that same quality DA converter, same quality streamer in our entry-level product and not change the price, which
That's
we
awesome.
are very proud of.
Well, and you sit there in the math room with that and sit there, wow, will this work out for us? And it's an interesting proposition at times. But one thing I always tell everybody, why don't manufacturers do this or that or this or that? And I think until you're actually sitting in that space, you don't really know why or can even really understand, because it is a whole nother level of thought, rather than you should have every feature under the sun and it should have the best DAC and so on and so forth. And manufacturers have to make decisions to determine, what are the proper things for them to be able to do at a particular price point, and also make it attainable and also long-term viable.
Yeah, it's a challenge very often of how difficult is it compared to how much do we think people want it.
Right.
And also sometimes you take on something that you think is going to be really easy. And it turns out to be extremely difficult because of the way we do things. Like Rune, that may come up as a question.
Actually, let's go ahead and cover that since you brought it up. I know that y'all have been talking about Rune endpoints. I've seen it in a lot of the chat rooms and things along that lines. And so let's tell our guest and myself a little bit about where that is, or what y'all are planning on.
It's very close to become a Rune endpoint. We took this project on, now it's almost 2 years ago. It's insane. It's almost 2 years ago. And we said, okay, we'll do Rune. We need some outside help for programming, but now we'll do it, sign the contracts, get on with it. It's probably going to take us half a year of hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't. And the big failure had been that we had already started talking about it, because we were a little bit high on ourselves after having passed Spotify certification on the first try twice, Apple certification on the first try almost 10 times. So we thought, yeah, we'll nail it. We didn't. It was a lot more work, because our operating system is not, we don't run a Linux operating system in our amplifiers as most people do. We wrote a proprietary operating system, ground up, in a programming language called assembly, which is the most basic one. And the idea was that we weren't really looking for something that could do Rune or Spotify or advanced streaming things.
Right.
We wanted to have the fastest responding amplifier for a system like Control 4 or Crestron in the world.
Okay.
So we made it very complex, yet very simple. But integrating something like Rune turned out to be a much bigger task than we anticipated. But now it's, unless we stumble really hard on the last leg, we're hoping to have it within a couple of months. We're fingers crossed.
That'd be awesome. I mean, I like Rune. I use it at home. I use it here at the store. It's a really, just great software. I like the fact that you can misspell an artist and they still find it.
Yeah,
I can't do that in anything else, and I'm not exactly the greatest speller, especially some of these names that I have to put in there. So it's always nice to be able to do that. But that's fantastic. I'm happy to hear and get a little bit of an update from you on that. And so I hope that all that will go through smoothly, and I'm sure y'all are on it. So I'm excited about it. I know y'all have got good engineers there. So, and I know the folks at Rune have been working with you for a while on it too. So
yeah, absolutely.
So that's awesome. So when, you know, it's a 60 watt per channel amplifier, some people would say, well, 60 watts, I mean, you know, I really need 100. What would you say to that?
Yes and no. It depends. Because more is more. There is no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say it's very speaker dependent. I'd also say that there's one particular thing in our amplifiers that has to do with this patented technology we have that I talked about in the beginning called sound engine. It gives very high damping factor. And the higher damping factor, the better control you have of the speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Or the bass drivers. You get more dynamic, more tight bass from it. So you don't feel the lower output wattage as much on a Hegel amplifier as you do with most others. But there is a limit to how loud you can play.
Right.
Put it like this: when we launched Hegel in America in 2009, the first show we went to was the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, and I sat before the show and I thought, oh my goodness, how are we going to show these Americans who have all of these great classic homegrown brands that we have something different? And then I thought about this, you know, how Hegel amplifiers can grip big speakers. So I went to the dealer in Denver, Listen Up, and I asked Phil, you know, what's the most difficult loudspeaker you have in the store that isn't, you know, completely off the charts? Right. He said, that's very easy because that's the B&W 802D2 loudspeakers. The 802s are very difficult. Yes. I said, can we please borrow those? And we could, and we hooked them up at the show and we put on our smallest integrated amplifier. It was then called the H70. It was 75 watts, no, 70 watts. So it's right in between the H90 and H120 now. Yep. And we played electronica loud on the 802s for a full weekend at the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest. And people still stop me in the halls there if I go to the show. They're, oh, I remember.
Yep, I remember hearing about that as well. So
you need 100 watts, maybe not. But then again, I just played on the new B&Ws a week ago on a demo event, the 800 D3s with the smallest H90. Did it fill the room for 40 people? Not quite.
Right. That's a big speaker. It's a big speaker.
It is a very big speaker. So you might. And, you know, when you move up from the 90 to an H120 or an H190, you know, a big chunk of the difference between those amplifiers is the output power. I'm not going to pretend it's not a lot about the output power. Right. More output transistor, bigger power supply, bigger toroidal transformer. It has something to do with the dynamic it's able to push out from those speakers.
Something I don't know. Do y'all use separate power supplies for your DAC in there, or is it?
No, we don't. Well, inside an amplifier, there are about 24 local power supplies.
Okay.
But there is one main power supply. And on the H90 and up into and including the H190, there is just one main power supply. You'll see two toroidal transformers inside, still one smaller one, and that is actually to help them go into standby to save the environment and use around 2 watts in standby while still listening on the things. They need the extra transformer to power up.
Okay.
But on the bigger amplifiers, there is a completely separate power supply for the preamp and DAC.
Okay.
That uses its own toroidal transformer.
And where does that start in the line?
But that starts with the H390.
Okay.
suddenly stepping up further a couple of $1,000.
Because, you know, the thing that I've learned, I mean, you know, in real estate, it's location, 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 and amplifiers, it's power supply, power supply, power supply. Now, just because it's bigger doesn't mean it sounds better, but if you take the same design and go bigger and bigger, it always sounds better. And I realize the design is more important than the size of it. But once you get that design right, then you can look at the size of it as being, or at least that's been my interpretation of what I've heard out there over my life. So, and I am not an engineer nor a designer of product. So,
no, neither. But I'm the listener, and during R&D, I get to listen to it all the time. And one of the engineers comes to me with, you know, the product we're working on, and he puts it on my desk, and it's just listen to this, okay? Yep. And in the beginning, I asked, "What have you done?" And then we decided, no, you can't ask that, because then you'll start, you know, hearing ghosts.
Yep.
So just listen to this, and I just take it into my reference system in the demo room, and you play around with it, and you listen, you hear things. Usually you hear also what they measured, even if you don't know it. It's, I'd say 80-90% of the times, it's, what is it? It's the same thing that you hear and what you measure. But one of the things you can't measure is bass. It's really difficult to measure bass in electronics. So when you're working on power supplies, you really have to listen, because if you have, not just in the main power supplies, but in many of the local power supplies, like just the ones that power the DAC chip, mm-hmm. If you don't have the correct size of the capacitors and things in there, if you're trying to save a cent where you shouldn't, you'll lose a lot in the bass and the weight and the, you know, sense of body and texture to everything. It's it's very important overall.
It's amazing how
listening to that.
It's amazing how delicate the balance of a product is. And, you know, I always tell everybody, execution, you can have all the greatest thoughts in the world, but it's how you actually execute each of those individual things that make the complete product.
Absolutely.
It's that execution that makes excellence. And so it's important to be working with folks that actually go through the homework.
Sure. And actually, it's digression again. I'm Captain Digression sometimes. But
it's okay.
When you talk about the power supplies, it's we also do a lot of blind testing on transformers, because all of our transformers are custom built, as I think they are for most manufacturers.
Yep.
But we order the same custom built transformer for maybe from 4 or 5 manufacturers of transformers, and we get samples in and we measure them, of course, and then we listen to the same spec transformer. We measure the same and in different amplifiers, and the sound difference is huge.
Yes, and it's also interesting how different amplifiers couple with different speakers. Mm-hmm. You know, some speakers require more control, some require less, and that kind of thing as well. And so the one thing I've noticed is some of our speakers down here, I won't mention by name, just if somebody wants to call me personally, I'm happy to do that. But you end up finding, I find that even with, you know, like the 190, which is a good strong 150 watts per channel, actually is just a really open sounding product, and just, I mean, the bass just flows from it. So very, very, very pleased with that product. And
sorry.
We also have a 590 down here on the floor that basically will nail about anything. So
oh yes.
Yes, that's a beast of a product. Let's so basically from the H90 or 95 as it is 60 watts per channel, the H120 being about 75 watts per channel. There's a difference of about $1,000 between those two. And then we go to the H190, which again is $4,000, and that goes all the way up to 150 watts per channel. And that's pretty much enough for most rooms, most speakers, most places, and that kind of thing. And I get asked this question a lot. Well, you know, if I go to a 390 or a 590, I'm never going to use all that power. Why in the world do I need to buy that amplifier?
Because it's so much better, Alan.
I know that answer from me. I wanted to hear it from you, and I agree with you.
No, it is. It's the H90, H120, H190. Those are something we call a Hegel 1 platform. They share one motherboard, and it's a solution that we made many years ago, and it allows us to make a really high performance amplifier. Discuss, is it reasonably priced or isn't it? But it's still reasonably priced compared to a lot of other things. But there is a limit. There's a glass ceiling of how far you can go.
Yep.
So if you take the lid of a 190 and a 390, it doesn't look like it comes from the same manufacturer even. It's completely different. All the layout, all the parts are much better separated from one another. There's a separate power supplies for the preamp and DAC sections. There's a separation also of the preamplifier and DAC. There is a closeness of the capacitors in the main power supply to the output transistors. There's a lot of things just in the layout, not just in component quality or sheer power, that distinguish a 190 from a 390. Most people, when I do a Hegel demo myself, I usually start with a good pair of speakers, and we start with the smallest amplifier we have, and then we compare that to a 120, then we compare that to a 190, and go all the way up to the top. And most people say that the biggest difference is between a 190 and a 390. Some people say the biggest difference is from a 390 to a 590.
Yep. I'm hearing the difference in the 190 to the 590, so I'm just jumping a step. And it's a pretty huge difference. I actually really enjoy both amplifiers, but the 590 is just, it's a kill, and that thing is 300 watts per channel versus the 150. So it's twice the amount of power and twice the amount of development and more space in the boards, as you say, between the parts and so on. And it's amazing how critical each of those little elements that you discussed is in the build of a product and the sound that we get from it. So anyway, I love that you explained that. One thing I wanted to ask you, and maybe you'll know this answer, and I kind of know the answer, but I'd like them to hear it from someone like yourself. And that is, so you make this board and you put more space between the parts. What does that do?
Noise, less noise.
Yep.
One of the challenges in our entry-level platform, for instance, is that the weaker signal coming from the preamplifier will have to pass through a lot of more powerful components in the power supply on their way to the output stage and things like that. And all of these components interact with one another. There are amplifiers of the bigger ones where there are very strict rules on exactly where the cables need to go inside the amplifier for them to interact. So it's noise. It's noise, and more noise.
Well, I will tell you, yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because one of the biggest things that I have talked about on all these HiFi chats, and for the last 3 years of my life and my experience here and learning, has been all about the reduction of noise. And I've learned a lot about that from DCS and their things, and HRS with their platforms and stands and that kind of thing. AudioQuest and Garth Powell with his power cords and the line conditioners that he's been doing. I probably called that the wrong thing according to him, but you end up finding that I've just been very impressed by that we have so much fidelity in some of this gear, and we just don't realize sometimes how much noise is in it versus another product with a lot less noise. And sometimes that noise is what wakes us up and makes our brain go, wow, I like that. And then in 30 days, we go, wow, I hate that. Once we get some time with it, because we don't realize that the noise is what makes our brain go active. And it literally, I call it kind of cognitive dissonance. And in other words, if you go into a restaurant, and I've said this on other HiFi chats, I'll go quickly for those that have been on before, but finding you go into a restaurant and you have that restaurant noise, kind of everybody talking and that kind of thing in the background, it kind of averages out over what you're listening to. And so you end up finding that your brain kind of has a hard time listening and a hard time talking and thinking and that kind of thing. And yet, if you took that restaurant and you lowered the noise floor, your brain would relax and allow kind of the conversation to go much easier and freer. And that's because of the way your brain interprets noise and what it does with it. So pretty amazing stuff. And I have spent a lot of time with it. So thank you for that. It helps us understand why some of these boxers are so big and the circuit boards are what they are and so on. And a lot of people say, why can't they make tiny, small products? Because they won't sound the same.
No, they won't. That could bring us up into the class AB versus class D discussion, but let's don't.
Yeah, okay. Okay. We won't go there. Okay. So what I want to know is a little bit about, y'all have a thing in your, I guess, marketing that I know is more than that, and it's called Sound Engine. What is it?
Sound Engine is, to take it short, it's an analog computer.
Okay.
Sound Engine sits inside our amplifiers, first of all. It also sits some other places for very particular reasons, but mainly in the output stages. That's where it matters.
Okay.
And what it does is it takes a sample from what goes into the amplifier section, the input level, and it takes a sample of what goes out of the amplifier section. And then it compares them by putting them on top and turning the phase on one.
Mm-hmm.
What you're left with then is the difference between the input and the output. What has happened? And what has happened is mainly distortion. What kind of distortion elements has been added? When you can compare them and extract the distortion, you can play the distortion real time into the circuit again, into the output circuit in reverse phase,
right,
and dynamically canceling out distortion on the way. So
that's pretty awesome. Where'd that idea come from? And are any other amplifier manufacturers out there using a similar?
No, there was some a few years ago, Halcor, who actually broke our patent. But they aren't there any longer, at least in the way they were.
Right.
But no, there's nobody who does anything like it. And the neat thing about it is, if you look at distortion measurement in a technical specification of an amplifier, it will say total harmonic distortion 0.005%. Nice. Okay, that's what they got when it tuned the bias on the output transistors. Yay. But music is not a static 1 kilohertz signal at full volume gain. It is dynamic. So the load will be dynamic. The gain will be dynamic. The frequency will be dynamic. And if you could measure distortion then in a norm or a conventional amplifier, the distortion would be sky high. So it's in that the real world of dynamic music, dynamic frequencies, that this system really performs so well, because it looks at the problem real time and plays it forward, not backward, but forward into the outputs. Wow. And dynamically cancel out the distortion that comes around.
It's an ingenious deal. It's pretty cool. And you can hear it in the amplifiers too. So anyway, congrats to you guys. How long have you had that patent?
The patent we've had since, I think it's 2001 or something.
Okay.
So it's been changed into a Sound Engine 2 that is much faster 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like everything else, advancing. Yeah. And actually, as the computers get faster, I guess it allows you to be faster. Is that kind of?
That's true. It was a vanity project from our owner, because he was the lead engineer for the original Sound Engine. And 3 years ago, we were at one of these round tables, and he just said, "Hey, I want to see if I can make it better." And
well, you mentioned earlier about him working in computers and that kind of thing. So it must have all come from those kind of thoughts when he was working in the micro stuff. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Isn't it funny, the little things we learn in different places that come back later to help us?
Exactly.
So why mostly integrated amplifiers? I know y'all make preamps and amps, so we're going to talk about that here in just a second, but why mostly integrated amplifiers from Hegel Music Systems?
I think it's because it's what people essentially want. I think more people would, realistically want an integrated amplifier. and it makes money up to a certain point. It makes sense in terms of price performance or cost performance. Because with a preamp power amp, even though if you do shield the sensitive preamplifier parts better from, the high power power amp, you do pay for a separate cabinet. Let's face it, cabinets is, it's a good percentage of many products. You have to pay for separate packing, separate shipping, separate remote control, separate
transformer,
all kinds of things. Yes. And it doesn't pay off.
Yep. I've always told everybody, if you have the exact same build quality and you put in separates, you'll have a better sound.
Yeah.
And but the two most expensive things in a product are the case and the transformer.
Yep.
So, or case and power supply, I should say. And so you have to multiply those, and that's why it's more expensive. And it definitely does reduce noise. No doubt about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. But you're really shooting sparrows with a machine gun. It doesn't make sense compared to all the other things you could do for that money in an integrated. But again, up to a certain point, because reality is catching up, and suddenly you have to separate the parts more and more and more and more to get those final benefits in terms of noise.
I totally agree. I have a lot of people at what I'd call the more reasonable dollared product ask me about separates, and I always tell them that I think the better value is in an integrated at the same money. When we get up to, as you say, in the higher tiers of audio and that kind of thing. So depending on where you want to go, separates can be a good thing, especially if you aspire to go far down the road in this with the sonics and, I guess a reduction in noise. So actually a very good explanation. Thank you. I had a question from a gentleman, Mr. Gary S., and I want to kind of put this out here. He said, my question is, will Hegel add bass and treble controls to a preamp? He's looking to upgrade, and the only two companies he's found are Luxman and Vincent. He says he has a $1,600 Vincent, which I like, but I am ready to upgrade. However, I refuse to buy anything without tone controls. Yeah. So you want to respond to that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question because
it is.
It's not that long ago that we discussed this specifically because we do think people want tone controls. Our problem has been that we see the problem too, that just having them, unless you make an advanced system of completely bypassing them, but that costs a bit of money too, you get phase issues that we don't like. And one of the things we have here at Hegel that can be annoying, like in situations like this, because I completely understand the gentleman.
Yep.
I would sometimes want them too, but we're very strong on that. Sound performance trumps everything, even if it's fantastic marketing. If it makes it sound less good, we shouldn't do it. There's been so many examples of that, but we want it. It's on the board. If we suddenly think of a clever way of, let's do it like this, we would make it instantly.
Yeah, because I mean, those tone controls, the sound has to go through them, unless again you spend a bunch of bucks for the bypass, and so then the price of the products goes up, and then you wonder whether that's viable or not. And when you think about the percentage of people that actually will use bass and treble controls, it's probably a pretty small portion, in my opinion. I think some people want it, then they go home and don't use it. But I'm not against it by any means, so I don't want to come across as that by all means. I again always tell everybody, I don't care how you want to enjoy your music. If you do, that's my love. And I used to fight Bluetooth an awful lot, and I don't even do that anymore because I realized that I was putting people in a penalty box for using something they enjoyed doing, and that's absolutely wrong of me. And so I got slapped by one of my employees, not literally, but mentally. And so I absolutely accept that. And, I tell people, hey, again, if you enjoy it, have at it. So,
but this shall be a short digression, but that's what our industry did so wrong for so many years.
Yep.
We were trying to force people into using their hi-fi as we did in, when we were young or the so-called good old days. But
Mm-hmm.
people aren't using hi-fi systems like they did in the good old days any
Yep.
longer. And we should, rather than, bashing somebody for using tone controls or using Bluetooth or using AirPlay,
Yep.
our job is actually to make tone controls, Bluetooth, AirPlay, whatever, as good as humanly possible.
I love that, and I think that's really a great point. And you said at the very beginning, our company is focused on how people use their product, and it
Yeah.
shows in what you've built and the kind of things that it actually has for it with AirPlay and streaming, and basically it's got USB SPDIF. Some of them have AirPlay, and then also DLNA, so that they can actually go from a hard drive in their own home. So that's awesome that you have that. So let's I hope Gary S., if you're listening, I know you're gonna, I think you told me you were gonna actually watch it later because you had an appointment this afternoon. So I hope that answers your question for you. And so let's get into some of the separates and that kind of thing. You have a couple of preamps, a P20 and a P30. Basically, they're $3,200 and $8,000 respectively. Tell us about those and what makes the difference in the jump.
Well, what makes the difference is fairly simple. The P20 is almost a preamplifier version of the preamplifier in the H390 and 590. So it has some very, very low noise transistors in the gain stage. And there is germanium transistors, very low noise.
Okay.
They have the same volume attenuator, which is a key thing in a preamplifier, as the rest of the range of products, actually, which isn't a volume control. It's a chip that was originally designed for high frequency measurement equipment. They even use it at the Large Hadron Collider in CERN in Switzerland.
Wow.
So it's something that isn't made for hi-fi, but because it's extremely good and it doesn't cost the same as something that is dipped in socket twice and blessed by somebody, and it works better. We have reprogrammed it to be volume control.
Well, the volume control is one of the biggest losses in audio.
Yeah, it is. It's a big problem. So the P20 is a attempt to make a preamplifier that it's separate, but it's not insanely expensive. And it's one of the areas, or one of the times, we've tried to be pragmatic and thinking that people are looking at myself. I love buying speakers. I love buying big power amplifiers. I would love maybe buying a DAC because there's so many features and things in DAC. Do
Right.
I love buying preamps? Not so much. So maybe
well, most people believe it's just a volume control with inputs, and it's so much more than that.
It is. So the P30 is what you really should own. The P30 is an exceptional preamplifier that we can only make a few more of them, because it uses a vintage Toshiba transistor from a factory that burned down. And the only ones who own some of these transistors now is us and Nelson Pass.
Wow.
Nelson Pass used all of his to make a 20-watt JFET power amplifier.
Yep.
Well, we have all of ours in stock, and we use it for the gain stage in the P30 preamplifier, and the input stage and voltage gain stage of the H30 reference power amplifier. But they are running out, and you cannot get any more. But they are exceptional because they don't make any harmonic distortion over the second and third, meaning you have the same characteristic of distortion as a tube amplifier, just much, much less of it.
Wow.
And they are in perfect pairs. So to find one pair, you have to test around, was it 28 or 32 on average transistors to find one perfect pair.
Wow.
For the gain stage. And that also limits it. There is just one for positive and one for negative phase. That's the
So
full gate stage.
let me ask you, for those, a lot of times when you talk about we only have so many left and that kind of thing, it makes people worried a little bit about, oh my gosh, if I buy one and I have a problem with that, what will I do? I'm sure that y'all are putting some away for your customers to be able to have.
You're putting a lot away.
I just wanted to put that out there so that people could be comfortable with that.
No, I don't think we've run out of components for any product we have ever made.
That is awesome.
So we still repair 20-year-old amplifiers without any problems. Old CD players. People are trying to chase down our old stock of CD player parts. But the gain stage is the one part of the P30. The other one is the volume control, because the volume control in the P30 is completely unique. It's a digitally controlled analog volume control. So the volume dial you have on the front is it's a pop meter that's reporting to a detector that detects where you want to have it. And then this detector instructs an array of single or double resistors to route the signal through 1, 2, or 3 resistors on its way to the output. So if you took the lid off, you'll see a big board with tons of ICs and blinking lights and resistor arrays. So it's a very advanced volume control that ensures ultra low distortion and very short signal path. That's a lot of blah, blah, blah. But the P30 carries weight.
Yes.
There is weight and a natural authority that the P20 lacks.
Well, something I have always tried to tell people is that power and control gets passed from one device to the next. And I think it's amazing. I have a lot of folks that are using these digital things with the volume control that are built into them. And that can be good up to a point. If you buy a good quality preamp and go bypass that volume control that's in that, you'd be absolutely amazed at the musicality that you bring back to the system. I have folks that have gotten rid of their preamps and then 2 years later going, now and I just don't like my music anymore. And I tell them, do you know why that is? They look at me and say, no. I say, it's because you got rid of your preamp. And anyway, it is amazing how important the preamp is. They're taking tiny little signals and make them large enough for the amplifier to be able to multiply it. And it really needs to be a really good product to really get some extreme musicality and fidelity from it. So anyway, very good explanation. So again, thank you. So then we've got H20 and H30 in the power amplifier sections. One is a 2x200, sells for about $6,000. And then you have basically a monster of an amplifier called the H30 that basically is 2x350 watts, or you can run that mono at 1100 watts.
It's actually a monoblock. But it's designed, it's designed as a monoblock, but you can also use it as a stereo. But let's look at the H20 first, because that's easier. The H20 is really a 390 power amplifier on steroids.
Okay.
It's the same output stages, but it's much improved input stages with better quality hand-matched transistors to reduce higher order harmonic distortion and so on. It's the same, or virtually the same Toshiba ones. And better components throughout. The output power is tuned a little bit down, and that helps us to get rid of a lot of heat. So to make it more stable in lower impedances. So an H20 would like itself and enjoy his days a lot more with a 2-ohm load than a 390 would. It would run hot, and it would have more headroom to control big speakers. We actually sell quite a few H20 power amplifiers, especially in the USA, where preamp power is a little bit more popular than it is here in Europe. But it is essentially a 390 power amplifier stage on steroids, and you see it when you take the lid off. So it would be stupid of me to say something else.
Again, great explanation. So let's talk about the H30. Tell me about that.
That is an animal. And it's my favorite amplifier set, obviously, when I compare a P30 and an H30 together. But the H30 can both be used as a monoblock which is the original design, but also a stereo amplifier. And the reason is a fight between me and the owner, where we couldn't agree if we should make a monoblock or a stereo power amp. So after weeks of bickering about this, we decided to do both. Because when you make an amplifier this powerful, 1100 watts continuous into 8 ohm, in 120 volts, it's actually more. But in Japan, it would be 1100. You're making a completely separate power amplifier for the positive phase and one for the negative phase. So it's reasonably inexpensive to put on 2 more input stages and allow you to use it as a stereo as well. But it's designed and intended as a monoblock. So the distortion is lowest as a monoblock by far, actually. It uses the same basic principles of layout as the 390, 590, H20, but it's still not the same platform. We call this one Hegel 4, which has different grounding systems. There's a lot of smaller things that are different. Also, the positioning of the capacitor bank that almost sits on top of the output transistors, making it very fast.
You know, I've always been amazed, and what I've always kind of told everybody, and what you're kind of going through, is that the way you build a better product, once you build a really good product, is to make a bunch of little teeny things that add up to that one big difference. Exactly. And that's how you end up getting to a whole nother level in an amplifier. So this thing, you know, is obviously a beast. I have no idea what it weighs. I don't have it on my sheet here, but
110, 115 pounds.
Yeah, nuts.
Compared to a lot of big power amps, like statement power amps, it's not that much, but it's also not that expensive compared to a lot of even at 17,000 pounds, dollars.
You know, we see from some of these, I would say in the US, we have some what I'd call direct only that have actually looked for some distribution companies, that kind of thing. And sorry for that, that sounds a little confusing, but you know, they build 1,000-watt monoblocks and they're, I don't know what, $1,000, $2,000 or whatever. And, you know, again, people get involved in that. I had a gentleman that had a pair of those, and, you know, we just put a stereo amp that was, you know, at about, you know, twice the money as a pair of those monoblocks, and it just destroyed them. And simply because it was a good design, not just about power.
Yeah.
And so,
exactly.
So again,
the H30s, it's the furthest we have been able to go thus far on finesse, but it's also a brutal amplifiers. 56 output transistors in each. Wow. So as a mono amp, that can power a Christmas tree. It's stable down to 0.5 ohms. You can use them with the old Apogees.
Yeah.
Fantastic with H30s on old Apogees.
Or a pair of teal, what is it, 5s?
Yeah. That's a challenge.
Yes. I remember when those were out, and you could hardly find anything to drive them. So there were only about 2 or 3 amplifiers in the world at that time that could really even drive them well. So, awesome. Again, quite a flagship product, and you know, I hope someday soon I'll be able to hear the P30 and H30s. That'd be really awesome. And anyway, it sounds amazing, and I again am really looking forward as we get deeper into this relationship and that kind of thing to be able to do more for each other. So anyway, so let's you have C series, which basically are multi-channel amplifiers, and they're basically 150 watt per channel. You build them in 3, 4, and 5 channel amplifier configurations, so people can get about as many numbers of channels as they wish. These could operate some pretty high-end stuff, you know, around the house, or you could actually do quite a killer theater with them as well. So does this design closely resemble some other stuff in the line as well, or?
It's a baby H30.
Okay.
Actually. So the output stages are designed specifically for this product, but it's the only other product in our range that share the topology and layout of the H30 reference power amp.
Okay.
So it came about because I was traveling around to dealers in the US. I love to travel in the USA, and you see that in all of them they have these big theaters. Some of them have very expensive systems. Some have really big speakers. Some build theaters with big stereo speakers, big center channel, big rear speakers, and they have great processors, and all the amplifiers are usually Class D. There are good things and bad things about Class D. So I'm not saying that we are, the rulers of everything. But if you have a big loudspeaker that drops in impedance at certain frequencies, Class D is usually not the right choice for you, is my claim. So we thought there is a market for us here, because everyone that used to make, big chunky multi-channel power amplifiers stopped making big chunky multi-channel power amplifiers.
Now they make 1U units that are.
So let's do that, because we can do that and we can do it really well. And so we basically made a baby H30. So the reason it's not a super impressive 500 watts per channel is heat, because many will put this in a rack and with 150 watts only and a lot of output transistors, we can get a lot of heat away and also make it extremely stable in low impedances. So it's about 150 in 8 ohms, 304 ohms, and 600 in 2 ohms.
Well, you start getting down there. You start getting down there, they do put out some heat. So if you have a demanding speaker, which they are meant for, you are definitely going to have some heat in them. So
we have many homes that use several of them. And for example, KEF loudspeakers has built a KEF experience theater in Tokyo, Japan. And they have 4 of these amplifiers stacked in a rack with 1U apart.
Wow.
Just driving big blade speakers all around.
Right.
No problem whatsoever.
Well, I bet that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I hope so. Where did get? I can't travel.
Well, I hope you get a chance to do that soon. All right, so we're going to get into kind of I'm not sure if I'd call it a new category, but relatively new for you with the HD30.
Yeah, well, it's not new. We made DA converters almost all along, but not in the early 2000s, because the technology wasn't there. Everybody started to make separate DACs in the mid 90s. And then they were, when you put the DAC in, it started to sound, there was more body and texture just because you had a better power supply in the DAC. But it also sounded much worse on so many things. And you didn't quite know why, but you had an idea it was jitter. So in the early 2000s, almost nobody made a DAC for this, because you didn't have the instrumentation to measure it. And that was the same case with us. But we took it back on again in 2009, and the HD30 is really the best DAC we can do right now. It is 3 years old, so there are some functions that it doesn't support. It doesn't have Spotify. It doesn't. It will not get Rune even if you buy it, because it doesn't have the engine there. But what really sets the HD30 apart from other things, is low noise. It's marketed with a noise floor of minus 149 dB.
Wow.
Actually more than minus 165, because it's the audio precision measuring equipment bottoming out at 149. They have a new one that we tried it on, but didn't buy it. But then it bottomed out at minus 165. And audio precision cannot say if it's the audio precision equipment or our DAC that bottoms out on noise. So it's very low noise, and it's partly due to a very elegant power supply.
Okay.
If you, in your demo room, just take an HD30 and plug it in the mains socket in the wall, the room will start to sound better.
Wow.
Because what comes back out of the HD30 is better than what came in. So you don't need to even play it. You can just plug it in to the main socket on the same circuit, and the system will start to sound better. So in our listening room at Hegel, I have 3 passive HD30s running
Wow.
at the time, just connected to the wall.
So they multiply.
Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. Obviously, a lot of design work went into that product, and so you know, I'm not sure the customer for that is Spotify, but if he wants to be, I guess you know, we can figure out other ways to get it in there. So
It's a very good DAC.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So the Mohican, how long has it been out?
The Mohican has been out since 2017.
That's what I thought you had said. Yes, I just didn't want to say it and be wrong. So, so is a lot of the technology that comes from the HD30 in the Mohican?
Yes, a lot, but not all. So much of the DAC in the HD30 is also in the Mohican, but in the Mohican, everything is optimized for 16-bit 44.1. It does not play SACD. There is no digital input of the Mohican, because the magic of the Mohican is that everything is 16-bit 44.1. And that comes back to almost everything inside that player except for the tray is built by Hegel. So we control the signal from when it's just a light pulse coming out of the laser. We control it all the way, and it's always 16-bit 44.1.
Wow.
It's the magic. It's so big. The first time I listened to a prototype that we were working on and developing on, I took a CD, Dead Can Dance live. I love it.
Right.
And I put it in the tray of the CD player. And first I connected the CD player with a digital cable through the HD30 DAC.
Mm-hmm.
Was our reference. So I used the external DAC instead of the one in the Mohican. I
Right.
played track 1, and I sat down, and yeah, it sounds fantastic. And then I went over and I connected this Mohican CD player directly into the amp using the onboard native 1644 DAC. And I sat down and I said, oh shoot, wrong track. And then I got up and went back to the system, and it wasn't the wrong track.
Like a different song.
Ambience, yes.
Wow. Well, you know, that CD alone has so much ambience. It's amazing, and you know, it is crazy how how different digital can be, and what a delicate. You know, we talk about phono having such a delicate signal and how you have to be so careful with it. And I think it's one of the things that most folks don't realize is how delicate a digital signal is.
Oh, yes.
So,
and the technology is so virgin compared to vinyl. So there's so many things that you still don't understand, and the effects of those are enormous.
Yep. And I was amazed that when we, we had turntables at one point, we advanced. People threw all their albums out. We didn't do a lot of advancing. Some companies did, but there were few in the business at that time. Then we've gone back to turntables, and you see the advancements that have happened in them with bearings and things along that lines, and manufacturing materials and tolerances and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing to see the advancements, and I just cannot believe and wait to see how far digital is capable of going as well. Because again, I think, as you state, I think we're still pretty much in the early stages of all that.
Yeah, I think it can go far, very far.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. I'm not sure we need to talk about the remote, so we'll leave that alone. But I did have a great question from somebody, and I just love this. So someone asked, if HiFi enthusiasts in Norway have to deal with spousal acceptance factor like here in the US?
Yes, they do.
I just thought that was really great. I think it's a great question. So one of the things that I always kind of get into is to tell us a little bit about patents and things like that. I know you mentioned the Sound Engine 2, and I guess original Sound Engine and Sound Engine 2 are under the same patent. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And are there other patents that Hegel owns?
No.
Okay.
We don't really think that a patent is worth all that much. It's great marketing,
Yes.
but it's not worth all that much. It's worth as, the deeper your pockets are, the more it's worth.
Right.
But we do a whole lot of basic research in audio that ends up in products in one way or the other. So we have worked a lot or done a lot of ground. You can't call it ground research because that's a pretty strong word, but we've done a lot of research and developed things around power supplies, especially for amplifiers and we have done a lot of research around clocks in digital players.
Okay.
We even use our patented sound engine to power or to control the transistor that switches the clock crystal in digital clocks to get the clocks more precise, stuff like that. But patents, no, we don't chase patents so much, even though the market is
obviously some pretty good folks think a lot of your work, because otherwise Halcro wouldn't have gone where they did.
Exactly.
So Chris, I don't see that we've got any other questions. I know we had 3 or 4 and we kind of answered them kind of as we went down the road. But in this crazy world right now, have y'all had to adjust your workflow in any way, or have you been able to pretty much been smooth sailing through this with manufacturing and that kind of thing as well?
Well, yes and no. I think we've been blessed at Hegel because the infection rates haven't been that high in Norway. Mm-hmm. So it has been able to run more or less as normal. The biggest problem we have had is that in March, when all this hit, all of us, we thought, ooh, this is going to be a problem. And we calculated and saw, yeah, sure. Even if sales drop to almost 0, we don't have to lay off anybody. We have enough cash to keep everybody paid until September, October, when it's going to start to hurt.
Yep.
And we reduced production plans and everything. And then the opposite happened. And it just skyrocketed because we want to have something nice at home when we can't go about. So right. The biggest struggle for us has actually been to get enough product and to get it out the door.
Well, quite honestly, that's kind of been our biggest issue as well. Is I've got a couple of amplifiers I've been looking for since March, and right. So it's been a little bit difficult in that regard. So I guess if this happens again, I'll make sure I order from you guys.
We actually have a decent amount on stock in the US and most things now.
Well, that's fantastic.
What is your orders now?
Anders, this has been awesome. I want to thank you so much for your time today. And I've actually learned a ton. And I've really enjoyed the conversation because we talked about more than just product. We talked about a lot of principles. And I think that's really important. And I love that the culture items that you brought up and those kind of things as well. So I wanted to thank you very much for sharing that time and of yourself and of your business with us.
Thank you very much. This has been great. And thank you for letting me attend. And I can't wait to come to Atlanta to see your store.
I look forward to it. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll stop somewhere and have a beer together. And so anyway, folks out there, if you will like and subscribe, at HiFiBuys.com. If you will go to the newsletter, get yourself informed about what we got going on. And let's again, prayers for the survivors of 9/11. I always lose words when I bring this up. So anyway, prayers for them all. Also, next week we'll have Odyssey on HiFi Chats number 22. But for today, this has been Anders Ertzeid, VP of Sales and Marketing at Hegel Music Systems. Apologize there. So anyway, I thank y'all. This is Alan Jones with HiFi Buys and HiFi Chats. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that was a lot of fun.
It was, wasn't it?
Yes. We really got into some decent conversation there. I think that, a lot of people, I just love it, people learning stuff and that kind of thing. And I always liken these things that I get to learn about people. And at the same time, I get to learn more and more about